Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. How's your day going? Did life throw a little mess your way, or maybe something unexpectedly sweet? If you're in need of a story gentle enough to soothe your spirit, yet real enough to stir your heart, you're exactly where you're meant to be. Today, let me tell you about Ruby Williams, a young woman doing her best to hold life together with grit, grace, and a little bit of hope. What began as just another stressful morning turned into a turning point she never saw coming. And it all started with a lipstick touch-up by the window of a car that didn't belong to her. Take a breath, get cozy, and let your heart wander with me, because this story might just remind you how the most unexpected moments can lead to the sweetest beginnings. That morning, Ruby Williams jolted awake as if someone had yanked her straight out of a half-finished dream, only to realize she'd overslept. With barely enough time to think, she shoved toast in her mouth, pulled on the least wrinkled work dress she could find, and sprinted out of her cramped apartment. Today was her first big interview, possibly her only chance in months, and she was already cutting it close. She missed the bus by seconds. With barely $10 in her wallet, she took a leap of faith and flagged down a taxi. As the cab darted through city streets toward the glossy tower of Brooks & Co., Ruby fumbled through her purse for lipstick. With no compact mirror, she scanned for a reflective surface and found it in the flawless side mirror of a parked black SUV. Grateful, she rushed over, leaned in, adjusted her bra strap, smoothed her hair, and began applying bold, red lipstick, the kind that screamed, fake confidence, real desperation. But just as she puckered her lips to check the corners, the tinted window slid down with a quiet hum. Her eyes locked with a man sitting calmly inside. He didn't look shocked. If anything, he looked like he was trying not to laugh. Ruby froze, mortified. For a full 2 seconds, she couldn't move. Then she muttered something that vaguely resembled, "Sorry," and spun around, power walking away like the sidewalk was on fire. Inside the car, Ethan Brooks, CEO of Brooks & Co., set his coffee cup down, still amused. He'd seen a lot of things outside his office window, but never someone turning his SUV into a makeshift vanity. Fate, of course, had its own plans. When Ruby walked into the lobby of Brooks & Co., she inhaled deeply. No matter how late or unpolished she felt, this interview mattered more than anything. She was guided to a sleek conference room, brightly lit, intimidating in its pristine elegance. And there he was, sitting at the head of the long table, coffee still in hand, was the man from the car. Their eyes met. Time froze. Ruby's stomach dropped. Ethan's expression didn't change much, just a slow, subtle lift of his brow, like he'd seen something curious or familiar. If Ruby could have hit a rewind button, she would have smashed it without hesitation. But life doesn't come with edit options. She swallowed hard, forced a polite smile, and slid into the nearest chair. Her heart thumped like a marching band in her chest. And the interview hadn't even started yet. Ruby sat stiffly, hands gripping the sides of her chair as if grounding herself would stop her thoughts from spiraling. She tried to focus, to act composed, but the memory of the SUV window rolling down refused to leave her mind. Across from her sat 3 members of the hiring panel. Ethan remained at the head of the table, quiet, unreadable, flipping through her resume with a calm detachment. He hadn't said a word yet. Occasionally, his eyes met hers, but there was no judgment in them, just curiosity. The interview began with the usual questions. Tell us about yourself. Do you have any experience in creative work? Why do you want to work at Brooks & Co.? Ruby answered honestly. She didn't embellish or pretend. She spoke about her part-time job at a coffee shop during college, where she learned to observe people and turn small details into story-driven design ideas. She shared how she saw advertising not just as a sales tool, but as a way to spark emotion. Something shifted in the room. One panelist nodded subtly, another smiled faintly, and then, for the first time, Ethan spoke. "What do you think makes a campaign unforgettable?" Ruby didn't pause. Honesty. People forget fancy words, but they don't forget how something made them feel. A real idea, one that comes from somewhere true, will always find its way to the heart. Silence. Ethan leaned back slightly, his brow furrowed, not in doubt, but in thought. He looked at Ruby a little differently now. When she walked out of that conference room, Ruby didn't know if she'd landed the job. But she did know one thing: she hadn't pretended. She'd shown up exactly as she was. And Ethan, well, he watched her leave with a hint of a smile. Because what just happened wasn't in her resume, but it definitely left an impression. Ruby officially joined Brooks & Co. on a damp Monday morning. She wore her interview dress, this time freshly ironed, paired with second-hand heels she'd polished the night before. Her hair was neatly tied back, and her heart beat somewhere between eager and terrified. Everything inside the company looked like a magazine spread. Sleek desks, spotless glass walls, colleagues who spoke in acronyms and moved like they belonged to a different world. Ruby felt like a messy sketch in a gallery of oil paintings. But she refused to shrink. In meetings, she pitched ideas others called odd at first, like using comic panels to tell a brand's journey, or designing a campaign around accidental coffee stains as symbols of spontaneous creativity. People chuckled, then they nodded. Ethan remained distant, as usual, but Ruby noticed the way his gaze lingered when she spoke. He didn't interrupt. He didn't smile, but he tilted his head slightly, like he was listening. One afternoon, she dropped a stack of papers in the elevator. Right as the doors opened, Ethan walked in. No words, just him kneeling beside her to help gather the scattered sheets. When he handed them back, their eyes met again. This time, there was no awkwardness, just a silence that felt oddly comfortable. Little by little, Ruby started to believe she wasn't just a misfit here. She was someone with a voice, with ideas, and maybe even in a place this polished, she could belong. Each morning, Ruby walked into the office with a smile and quiet determination. But after 6 p.m., her reality was very different. Home was a cramped studio with peeling walls, a leaking faucet, and loud music from the neighbor's TV. That month, rent was overdue, and the landlord had knocked with a glare that said time was running out. Ruby had nodded, promising she'd figure it out, even though she wasn't sure how. One morning, an email landed in her inbox from HR. It announced a new support program for entry-level employees, temporary housing assistance for the first 3 months. Ruby blinked at the screen in disbelief. She'd never heard of such a program before, but it felt like a lifeline tossed right when she was about to sink. What she didn't know was that the night before, Ethan had quietly added her name to the list after overhearing a fragment of her phone call in the break room, her voice hushed and shaky when she spoke of rent and overdue bills. He didn't say anything, no signature, no spotlight. Ruby never found out who had helped her, but as she stared at that email, her eyes welled up with quiet gratitude. She whispered a soft thank you to no one in particular. Some kindnesses, she thought, arrive like whispers, not to be noticed, just to help you keep going. Ruby never tried to stand out, but somehow she kept starring in the kinds of moments no one would choose. In her first week, she spilled an entire cup of coffee on a printed client pitch. In the second, she got locked in the bathroom because the door latch broke. In the third, her worn-out heel snapped during a department-wide meeting, sending her stumbling forward, nearly into the front row. And every single time, Ethan appeared. Just in time. No dramatic entrances, no lectures, just quiet gestures. A tissue, a steadying hand, or, in one particularly surreal moment, offering her his own sneakers when she clearly couldn't walk in one broken heel. One day, the elevator jammed between the 9th and 10th floor. Only 2 people were inside, Ruby and Ethan. She gave a nervous laugh. This isn't my first time being stuck somewhere, but it's definitely the first time being stuck with my boss. Ethan paused, then, shockingly, smiled. And you're staying remarkably calm, impressive. The tension melted slightly. The elevator didn't feel like a box anymore, just a quiet space where 2 very human people waited. After that day, Ruby started to notice a pattern. Ethan was quiet, but he was present. When she left her presentation on the printer minutes before a big meeting, he was the one who slid it onto her desk just in time. When she joked about wanting a window seat to daydream better, her desk was moved 2 days later. No explanation, no credit. She began to spot the smallest things. Her favorite herbal tea stocked in the kitchen. A soft indie song she loved playing faintly in the elevator every morning. Nothing flashy, but everything somehow intentional. They'd never had lunch together. They'd never exchanged more than 5 words outside of work talk. And yet, something hung in the air between them. A connection. Wordless, but present. Their glances became familiar, almost expected. A silent check-in, an acknowledgement across the office space. And slowly, quietly, Ruby found herself looking forward to them. And Ethan, well, he seemed to do the same. When Ruby was selected for a 2-week work trip to the Seattle branch, she felt a mix of excitement and unease. It was a big opportunity, but also the first time she'd be away from her usual rhythm, and from a certain quiet presence she hadn't fully acknowledged. She didn't tell anyone, but part of her hesitated to leave, not because of her desk or the usual chaos, but because of Ethan. It was strange. They weren't close, they hadn't even shared a full lunch, but in the past few weeks, Ethan had become a sort of gentle constant in her life, like a nightlight, not bright, but always there. Ethan felt the shift the very first day she was gone. The Monday morning meeting felt dull without her soft-spoken yet sharp observations. No one knocked on his door asking for extra sketch paper, or clumsily entered holding an overfilled cup of herbal tea. No one dropped pens, apologized with an embarrassed grin, or filled the room with a quiet but oddly comforting energy. And he realized he missed that. He checked the internal inbox. Nothing from Ruby. Walked past her desk, empty, except for a tiny leaning cactus. Like it, too, missed her. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Ruby handled everything flawlessly. The campaign was a hit. The team praised her ideas. But every night, back in her unfamiliar hotel room, she'd pick up her phone, type a message to Ethan, and delete it. What reason could she possibly have to message her CEO? But on her final night in Seattle, staring out at the soft city lights, Ruby realized something. She didn't just miss work, she missed someone. The next morning when she returned, everything looked the same. Her desk, her coworkers, the buzz of the office. But when she opened her computer, a single message popped up. "Welcome back, Ruby. The office felt oddly quiet without you." She read it again and again. Her fingers hovered over the mouse, but her heart felt like it was sprinting laps around the building. She looked up. Ethan was watching her from the conference room. He gave a small nod. That evening, they both left work at the same time. The streets were quiet, the city humming in gold and blue. Ethan spoke first. "Seattle go okay?" Ruby smiled. "Yeah, it was fine, but not every office has someone who hands you paper when you spill coffee." He laughed, really laughed. "You know," he said softly, "I didn't think I'd get used to this place," missing a little clumsiness. Ruby looked at him. No title, no formality, just a person, finally speaking from somewhere honest. "I didn't think I'd miss the little things this much either," she whispered. For the first time, they didn't take separate paths. They walked in the same direction, side by side, under the sleeping city. After that night, walking side by side under the soft glow of the city, something shifted between them. Not suddenly, not with grand declarations or kisses in the rain, but with longer glances, morning texts, the first quiet lunch they shared in Ethan's office. No awkwardness, just presence. One day, after Ruby led a major campaign to success and received praise from the board, she opened her inbox to a single line from Ethan. "I always believed in your ideas. I just didn't want to say it too soon." Her heart skipped. That evening, Ruby didn't text him back. She walked to his office. Didn't knock. Didn't hesitate. Ethan looked up. She stepped in, eyes locked on his. "So did I," she said softly. "I've always believed in you too, and I'm tired of pretending this is just work." He didn't reply with words, but his eyes did. They kissed, not dramatically, not perfectly, but honestly. From that point, love grew, not loudly, but truly. They weren't flashy. Ruby never posted romantic selfies. Ethan didn't write poems, but they showed up for each other. In quiet corners of cafes, in gentle conversations after long days. When Ruby caught a fever, Ethan brought soup, the only thing he could cook, and sat beside her until she fell asleep. She didn't say anything then, but in the morning she left a note. "I think I'm falling more in love with you every day." Ethan pinned it to his office wall. Nearly a year after their first real kiss, Ruby and Ethan stood by the sea. The wind was gentle, the waves calm, and the sky bathed in warm shades of gold. There was no extravagant dress, no choir, no grand ballroom, just a handful of close friends, soft acoustic music, and two people who had once crossed paths awkwardly and slowly, meaningfully, found their way back to each other. Ruby wore a simple white dress, her hair tied back loosely, a few strands dancing in the breeze. Ethan, ever himself, looked at her, not with awe, but with something deeper: peace. When it came time for vows, there were no grand speeches. Ethan held her hands and said, "I never imagined love would come softly, with spilled coffee and quiet lunches, but it did. Thank you for seeing me, not the title, not the office, just me." Ruby laughed softly, her eyes shimmering. "I didn't stay. You were the one who waited first." Applause followed, not thunderous, but warm, like waves meeting the shore. It wasn't a fairy tale wedding. It was something better. It was real. They moved into a small apartment with sunlit windows and books scattered on every shelf. Ruby continued her work at Brooks & Co., this time as creative director. Ethan remained CEO, but now he often walked into her office carrying her favorite tea, with that knowing smile only she could read. One morning, light filtering through soft curtains, Ruby placed a hand on her stomach, where something new and tiny was growing. Ethan kissed her forehead gently and whispered, "My life used to be so quiet until you arrived." She leaned into him, eyes closed, heart still. From an awkward lipstick moment outside a car window to a life built on quiet gestures and deep connection, they had found something that was never loud, but always true. A new chapter had begun, of love, of understanding, of family. Because sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the messiest moments. You a lipstick moment to a lifetime together, Ruby and Ethan's story reminds us how love often begins in the most unexpected ways. Now it's your turn. Have you ever had an awkward encounter that turned into something unforgettable, or a small gesture that meant the world to you? Share your stories in the comments. I'd love to read them. And if Ruby's journey touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Noah's Stories for more soul-soothing tales. This little corner of the internet grows more beautiful with you in it. See you in the next video, lovely soul.